Chinedu Okonkwo stood back to admire his handiwork, a birthday cake he'd bake himself, frosted somewhat unevenly but with genuine effort. 28 candles crowded the surface, their colorful wax a cheerful contrast to the peeling paint and cracked plaster of his kitchen. Outside, Lagos traffic honked and bustled, but inside his grandfather's old house, a fragile hope hung in the air. His phone buzzed with a message from Nkechi. On my way. Need to talk. The brief text lacked her usual emojis and exclamation points, but Chinedu dismissed his unease. Things had been tense lately, true, but it was his birthday. Surely that warranted a temporary truce in their ongoing argument about his living situation. He glanced around the living room, seeing it through Nkechi's eyes, the sagging couch he covered with a brightly patterned cloth, the mismatched furniture inherited from his grandfather, the architectural drawings pinned to walls to hide the worst of the water stains. It wasn't much, but it was home. The only home he'd known since his parents' death 10 years ago. The sound of a car pulling up outside sent him hurrying to the mirror, straightening his collar and practicing his smile. Nkechi Adeyemi deserved his best face, even if her recent promotion at the marketing firm had made her increasingly critical of his modest circumstances. When he opened the door, the sight of her took his breath away, as it always did. Nkechi was stunning in a crimson dress that hugged her curves, her braids arranged in an elaborate updo that spoke of hours in an expensive salon. Gold glinted at her ears, throat, and wrists. New jewelry he couldn't have afforded on his struggling architect's income. "Happy birthday," she said, brushing past him without offering a kiss. Her designer perfume lingered in the air, expensive and slightly intimidating. "Thank you." He closed the door, hope and uncertainty battling in his chest. "You look beautiful." "This old thing?" She shrugged, though both knew the dress was anything but old. Her gaze swept the room, disappointment evident in the slight downturn of her full lips. "Still no progress on the renovations, I see." And there it was, the tension that had been building between them for months, surfacing before he could even offer her a drink. "I've been focused on landing new clients," he explained, leading her to the kitchen where he prepared a simple meal alongside his lopsided cake. "My design for the community center reached the final selection round. If I get the contract." If. She sighed, setting her designer handbag on the counter with evident reluctance, as though the surface might soil it. "Chinedu, we've been having this conversation for 2 years. Your potential is undeniable, but potential doesn't pay bills or secure our future." "My practice is growing," he insisted, the birthday joy evaporating. "I just need time." "Time." She laughed without humor. "Meanwhile, I'm turning down dinner invitations from my boss because I'm embarrassed to tell him where my fiancée lives. Do you know what that feels like?" The words stung more than they should have. They'd had this fight before, but never on his birthday, never with such naked disdain in her voice. "I'm sorry my home embarrasses you," he said quietly, abandoning the pretense of celebration. "My grandfather raised me here after my parents died. It might not be fancy, but it has meaning." "Meaning won't get us into the right social circles," Nkechi replied, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her handbag. "My career is taking off. I'm meeting important people every day, people who could help both of us if you just make some compromises. Like selling my family home? Like recognizing investment opportunity." Her voice rose. "This neighborhood is changing. Developers would pay well above market value for this plot. We could buy something impressive in Lekki, something that reflects our ambitions." Chinedu looked at the cake he'd baked, its candles unlit, the effort suddenly pathetic in light of the gulf between them. How had they come to this? 2 years ago, Nkechi had loved his dedication to his craft, had found his modest living charming rather than shameful. She'd sit with him for hours as he explained his architectural drawings, offering insights that improved his designs. Now she couldn't look at his home, at him, without seeing a project in need of upgrading. "Remember when we talked about restoring this place together?" he asked, nostalgia a physical ache in his chest. "You had all those ideas about exposing the original woodwork, creating a garden studio for my drafting table." A flicker of something, regret, impatience, crossed her face. "That was before I understood what we'd be giving up by clinging to the past." We need to think about our future. Chinidu, my colleagues' husbands are opening doors for them. Meanwhile, you're stubbornly holding on to a crumbling house because of sentimentality. It's not just sentimentality, he protested. This house is all I have left of my family. It's a structure, she countered coldly. Your family lives in your memories, not these walls. She gestured to the ceiling where water damage bloomed like storm clouds. Look at this place objectively. It's falling apart. The renovation would cost more than the property is worth. Some things are worth more than their market value, he insisted, a rare flare of anger heating his words. Nkechi stared at him for a long moment, her beautiful face set in lines of frustration. Then, with deliberate movements, she reached into her handbag and withdrew a glossy folder. I took the liberty of getting a property valuation and meeting with a developer, she said, sliding the folder across the counter toward him. They're prepared to make an offer significantly above market rate, enough for a down payment on something in Victoria Island or Koi, somewhere we wouldn't be ashamed to entertain. Chinita stared at the folder without touching it, betrayal a cold weight in his stomach. You did this behind my back? Because you refused to face reality. Her composure cracked slightly. We've been engaged for 8 months. Chinidu, I've been patient. I've waited for your business to take off. But I can't put my life on hold forever while you cling to a worthless shack out of some misplaced loyalty to your grandfather. Worthless. The word hung between them, taking on meaning beyond real estate. Is that how you see everything that isn't new and shiny? Worthless. Don't twist my words, she warned. I'm trying to help us both. No, you're trying to remake me into someone your colleagues won't look down on, he responded, an unexpected clarity cutting through his hurt. But I'm not a project, Nkechi. Neither is this house. She threw up her hands in exasperation. This stubbornness is self-sabotage. Do you think your grandfather would want you living like this, rejecting opportunities because of some romantic notion about his memory? Don't pretend you knew him, Chinidu said quietly, his voice steady despite the churning emotions. He taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by his address or bank account. Apparently that's a lesson you never learned. Her eyes widened at the uncharacteristic challenge. Chinidu had always been the peacemaker in their relationship, the one to apologize first, to find compromises that favored her preferences. But something had shifted, some essential support beam in the architecture of their relationship finally giving way under too much strain. I've tried to be understanding, she said, her voice cooling to professional displeasure. But I can't keep pretending that your choices aren't affecting my life, my career. My boss is hosting a networking event next week at his home in Banana Island. The CEO of Nigeria's largest advertising firm will be there. How can I bring you as my fiancé when you're a struggling architect living in a house that looks ready for demolition? The question landed like a slap. If you're ashamed of me now, Nkechi, a new address won't change that. That's not fair, she protested, though her gaze slid away from his. I believe in your talent. I just think you're making choices that limit both of us. No, Chinidu said, the clarity sharpening further. You believe in my potential to become someone else, someone who fits your narrative. He gestured to forgotten cake, the modest meal he prepared. You can't even celebrate my birthday without turning it into a negotiation about my worth, because I'm trying to secure our future. Frustration raised her voice again. While you're living in the past like some hopeless dreamer stuck in poverty by choice. The words hung in the air, too honest to be unsaid, too cruel to be forgiven easily. Chinidu stepped back, physically removing himself from her judgment. Some things aren't for sale, Nkechi. Not my home, not my memories, and apparently not my worth as a man. She stared at him, disbelief warring with anger on her beautiful face. This wasn't how their arguments usually ended. He was supposed to apologize, to promise to consider her perspective, to concede that her more worldly experience probably knew best. When he remained silent, resolution firming his jaw, something shifted in her expression, calculation replacing frustration. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice deliberately controlled. I've tried to be patient, but you're choosing a dilapidated house over our future together. She twisted the engagement ring from her finger. The ring he'd saved for 6 months to buy, though now she made the gesture seem like removing a burden. When you're ready to start living in the real world, call me. Until then, I need a partner, not a custodian of faded memories. The ring made a small metallic sound as she placed it on the counter. Without waiting for his response, she collected her handbag and walked the door, heels clicking decisively on the worn wooden floor. "You'll regret the stubbornness," she said, pausing at the threshold. "One day you'll realize what you gave up because you couldn't let go of the past." The door closed behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through the old house. Chinedu stood motionless in his kitchen, the birthday cake a sad witness to the end of his engagement. Strangely, beneath the hurt and shock, a small sense of liberation unfurled. How long had he been contorting himself to meet Nkechi's expectations? How many times had he swallowed his own needs to accommodate her vision of their future? He picked up the engagement ring, so much smaller and lighter without her finger to give it purpose. 2 years of his life, of shared dreams and compromises, mostly his, ended on his birthday. Outside, her car started with an expensive purr, then faded into the Lagos traffic. Inside, the old house seemed to exhale around him, as though relieved to no longer be the subject of valuation and critique. "Just you and me again," he said aloud to the empty rooms. His gaze caught on a particularly bad section of wall in the hallway, where water damage had caused the plaster to crumble. He'd been putting off repairs, partly from lack of funds, partly from uncertainty about the home's future given Nkechi's constant pressure to sell. But now, with the weight of her expectations lifted, a new determination filled him. This house had sheltered 3 generations of his family. It deserved better than neglect born from someone else's disappointment. Tomorrow, he would begin renovations, starting with his grandfather's bedroom where the damage was worst. Not to increase the property value or impress anyone, but because this home, like his integrity, like his memories, was worth preserving. He extinguished the unlit birthday candles and wrapped the cake for later. This wasn't the celebration he had planned, but perhaps it was the beginning he needed. She walked out when he was broke, but now he's rich, she wants him back. If you think he should forgive her or tell her to keep walking, smash that like button and subscribe to Africantales by Zion. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you take back someone who only values you when you have money? The next chapter brings a shocking discovery you won't believe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Morning arrived with the indifference of a new day that didn't care about broken engagements or birthday disappointments. Chinedu woke on the couch, having fallen asleep there after hours of alternating between anger and regret. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Nkechi, but no voicemails or messages. Testing the waters, perhaps, to see if he'd come to his senses overnight. He ignored the notifications and made himself a strong cup of coffee. The kitchen still held evidence of his birthday preparations, the wrapped cake, the meal he never served. With methodical movements, he cleared it all away, as though erasing the physical remnants might ease the emotional sting. "New day, new start," he muttered to himself, the words his grandfather had repeated like a mantra through difficult times. Old Okonkwo had purchased this house in the late 70s, proud to establish a family home after years of renting. He'd been a mathematics teacher, not wealthy but respected, and had saved diligently for decades to afford the property. What would his grandfather think of Nkechi's assessment? A worthless shack. Faded memories not worth preserving. Coffee in hand, Chinedu walked to his grandfather's bedroom, which he'd been using as storage since the roof leak had made it uninhabitable last rainy season. It was the most damaged room in the house, with a section of wall where moisture had caused the plaster to bubble and crack. He'd gotten estimates for repair, amounts that had made Nkechi roll her eyes and suggest, yet again, that selling was the only sensible option. But today, instead of lamenting what he couldn't afford, Chinedu found himself gripped by a fierce determination. He would fix this house himself, one room at a time, starting right now. He changed into work clothes, assembled the basic tools he owned, and purchased supplies from the hardware store down the street. The owner, recognizing him, asked after his architectural practice. Still growing, Chinedu replied with more optimism than he felt. but I'm focusing on home repairs today. About time, the man said with a knowing nod. Good house, strong bones. Needs care, that's all. The casual validation strengthened Chinidu's resolve. He returned home and set to work, channeling his emotional turmoil into physical labor. Each crack of his hammer against the damaged wall felt cathartic. Each section of crumbling plaster removed, like excising Ketchy's criticism from his mind. She didn't even give me a chance, he told the empty room, his words punctuated by hammer blows. 6 months, she said. 6 months to prove my worth. Another strike, harder this time, as if my value could be measured in bank statements and property deeds. The rhythm of his work established a kind of meditation, allowing his mind to process the events of last night. Had he been unreasonable? Was his attachment to the house truly an unhealthy anchor to the past, as Nkechi claimed? He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. No, he decided. This wasn't just about sentimentality. It was about values, what he was willing to compromise and what he wasn't. Perhaps their breakup revealed a fundamental incompatibility that would have surfaced eventually, no matter where they lived. Renewed in his conviction, Chinidu attacked a particularly damaged section of wall where the plaster had completely separated from the underlying structure. He expected resistance, but instead, the material gave way with surprising ease, crumbling in large chunks to reveal something unexpected behind it. Not the usual lath and building materials, but what appeared to be a hollow space. What the... He paused, hammer suspended midair, as dust settled to reveal a small compartment built into the wall itself. It was deliberately constructed, not a structural flaw or damage, but a hidden space roughly 2 feet square, concealed behind a bedroom wall. Curiosity overcame caution. Using his phone's flashlight, Chinidu peered inside. The beam illuminated something metallic, a case of some kind, pushed the back of the compartment. With careful movements, he reached in and extracted it, surprised by its substantial weight. The case was made of weatherproof metal, the kind used for secure document storage, with a combination lock on its front. It looked old but well-preserved, as though someone had taken great care to protect its contents before concealing it. Chinidu sat on the floor, heart beating faster. His grandfather had never mentioned a hidden safe or secret compartment. Had the old man known it was there? Or had it been hidden before he purchased the house? Its existence a mystery to everyone until this moment? The combination lock presented an immediate obstacle. Chinidu tried his grandfather's birthday, then his own, both unsuccessful, after several attempts with significant family dates. He set the case aside and returned to the compartment for further investigation. His light revealed something else pushed against the back, a manila envelope, yellowed with age. He retrieved it, opened it carefully, and pulled out what appeared to be newspaper clippings, the paper brittle but legible. The headline of the topmost article, "May His Blood Run Cold. Millions Missing in Daring Bank Heist. Suspects Still at Large." The article, dated September 1985, detailed a robbery of the National Commerce Bank in Lagos, 10 years before his grandfather had purchased the house. According to the journalist, 3 masked men had stolen cash and gold valued at over 50 million naira, an enormous sum for that time. The case had never been solved, the money never recovered. Chinidu's hands trembled as he set the clipping aside and examined the others. All pertained to the same robbery. Follow-up articles tracking the failed police investigation, speculations about the thieves' identities, theories about where the money had gone. With growing unease, he turned his attention back to the metal case. The combination lock now took on more ominous significance. If this case contained what he suspected, a wild thought struck him. The newspaper's date, September 18th, 1985. With shaking fingers, he turned the lock's dials to 9-1-8-5. A click. The lock released. Chinidu hesitated, suddenly uncertain whether he wanted to see the contents. Opening this case could change everything. But curiosity overwhelmed caution, and he lifted the lid. Inside, neatly arranged and preserved in plastic, lay stacks of foreign currency, U.S. dollars, British pounds, German marks, currencies that would have been particularly valuable in 1980s Nigeria. Beneath the cash, several small gold bars, each marked with weight and purity. "Oh my God," he whispered, the implications washing over him in a dizzying wave. He had just found what appeared to be the proceeds from a bank robbery, money that had been hidden in his wall for decades, probably stashed by one of the thieves and never retrieved. Money that didn't belong to him, that had been stolen from a bank almost 40 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just hours after Nkechi had left him for being poor, he had discovered a fortune that could solve all his financial problems instantly. He could renovate the house, invest in his architectural practice, buy the car Nkechi had always wanted him to own. He could call her right now, tell her things had changed, watch her expression when she realized what she had walked away from. But the money wasn't his. It had been stolen, hidden by criminals in a house that later, by chance, became his family home. His grandfather, a man of impeccable integrity, had likely never known about the hidden compartment, never suspected that the home he'd saved his whole life to purchase contained ill-gotten gains concealed within its walls. Chinedu sat back on his heels, moral dilemma crashing against practical temptation. What were his options? He could keep the money. After nearly 40 years, the trail was cold. The statute of limitations on a robbery likely expired. No one knew about his discovery. The bank had surely covered the loss through insurance decades ago. Or he could report it to the police. Money that was never his, found by pure chance. Would they believe he had just discovered it? Or would they suspect he'd been involved somehow, impossible as that was given his age? And if he did report it, what then? Would the money go back to the bank? To government coffers? Would there be any finder's fee? Or would he have sacrificed a fortune for moral principles alone? The questions swirled in his mind, ethical considerations battling pragmatic ones, all shadowed by the ghost in Nkechi's voice. When you're ready to start living in the real world, call me. Was this the real world she meant? One where principles were flexible, where decisions were made based on advantage rather than right and wrong. His phone rang, cutting through his moral deliberation. Nkechi's name flashed on the screen. With strange calm, he answered. Chinedu. Her voice was carefully modulated, professional warmth covering the tension beneath. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. I may have been a bit hasty. Hasty, he repeated, the word empty of meaning as he stared at the fortune spread across his dusty floor. We both said things in the heat of the moment, she continued smoothly. I still believe you need to think more practically about our future, but perhaps we can discuss it more calmly. Over dinner, maybe? Tomorrow night. The timing was so perfect, it was almost comical. Less than 24 hours after walking out, she was already testing the waters for reconciliation. And now, with uncanny cosmic irony, he sat beside a fortune that would immediately solve the very problem that had driven her away. Chinedu, are you there? Yes, he managed. Dinner. Tomorrow. I'll text you the details later. After ending the call, he returned to the moral problem at hand. He needed advice, but from someone whose moral compass he trusted implicitly. His parents were gone, his grandfather too, but there was his uncle, his father's brother who had helped raise him after his parents' accident. Uncle Emeka, a retired police officer whose integrity had never wavered throughout his 30-year career. If anyone could help navigate this moral quagmire, it would be Uncle Emeka. But Chinedu wasn't ready to reveal everything over the phone. Some conversations needed to happen in person. Carefully, he returned the money in gold to the case, locked it, and hid it in his closet beneath old architectural textbooks. The newspaper clippings he placed in his desk drawer, beneath his current projects. Then he cleaned himself up and tried to process the whirlwind of events. In less than 24 hours, he had lost his fiancée, discovered a hidden fortune, and potentially found himself at a life-defining moral crossroads. What he decided to do next will reveal more about his character than any architectural design ever could. As evening approached, his phone buzzed with a text from Kemi, his childhood friend and neighbor from his university days. Heard about you and Nkechi. You okay? Need anything? The simple message, free of judgment or agenda, brought unexpected comfort. Unlike Nkechi, Kemi had never made him feel inadequate for his choices or circumstances. An elementary school teacher with her own modest apartment, she understood the value of work that fulfilled the soul even if it didn't fill the bank account. I'm managing, He texted back. A lot to process. I'm bringing dinner tomorrow, came her immediate reply. No arguments. Friends don't let friends eat breakup cake alone. Despite everything, he smiled. She remembered it was his birthday, remembered his tradition of baking his own cake. That small understanding felt like a lifeline amid the moral chaos swirling around him. Chinedu spent a restless night, dreams filled with bank robbers, hidden treasures, and Kechi alternately walking away and returning, her affection directly proportional to the money in his hands. He woke exhausted, the weight of his discovery even heavier in the morning light. After a quick breakfast, he called Uncle Emeka and arranged to meet later that day. He spent the intervening hours attempting to work on client drawings, but his concentration constantly drifted to the case hidden in his closet and the decision that awaited him. By afternoon, he had reached no firm conclusion. The practical benefits of keeping the money were undeniable. His financial struggles instantly resolved, his professional dreams funded, his standing in society secured. Yet the ethical cost nagged at him. Would he be able to live with himself, knowing his comfort was built on stolen money? Would his grandfather's values, instilled through years of guidance, allow him to enjoy prosperity founded on such a compromise? As he prepared to leave for his meeting with Uncle Emeka, Chinedu paused at his desk, staring at the drawer containing the newspaper clippings. On impulse, he retrieved them, sensing they would be necessary to explain his dilemma fully. What he didn't take was the case itself. That decision, at least, felt clear. He wouldn't transport what might be stolen property across Lagos, risk being stopped by police for some routine matter only to have his life imploded by the discovery. As he locked his front door, his phone chimed with a message from Kechi, confirming their dinner plans for that evening. She had taken the liberty of making reservations at an upscale restaurant in Victoria Island. The kind of place she had always wanted him to take her, though its prices were well beyond his normal budget. The assumption behind her choice was clear. She expected him to make conciliatory gestures, to demonstrate his willingness to adapt to her standards now that he'd had time to reconsider his position. What would she say, he wondered, if she knew about his discovery? Would her renewed interest intensify? Would the hesitation in her recommitment vanish if she knew financial stability might be immediately within reach? The questions followed him as he traveled to meet his uncle, moral implications layering upon practical considerations, all shadowed by the most fundamental question of all. What kind of man did he want to be? The stranger returned in a luxury, sir, and Chioma is already making secret calls. If you're feeling suspicious about this mysterious man's intentions, hit that like button and subscribe to Africantales by Zion. Comment below. Is Chioma being a protective friend or a jealous snake? The dinner date in our next chapter will shock you. Share with friends who love unexpected romance. Turn on notifications. Uncle Emeka's modest home in Surulere remained unchanged since Chinedu's childhood visits, a place where order and principle reigned supreme. Retired after 30 years on the police force, Uncle Emeka now spent his days tending his garden and serving as a respected elder in the community, often consulted for dispute resolution. The older man welcomed Chinedu with a firm handshake and concerned eyes. "Your voice sounded troubled on the phone," he said, leading him to the small veranda where 2 chairs awaited beside a table bearing a pitcher of cold water. "Is this about Nkechi? I heard there was a disagreement." "Partly," Chinedu admitted, accepting a glass of water. "She ended our engagement last night." Uncle Emeka's expression registered disappointment, but not surprise. "Because of the house?" "Because I wouldn't sell it," Chinedu confirmed. "But that's not why I needed to see you. Something else happened. Something I need advice about." For the next 10 minutes, Chinedu explained his discovery, from the damaged wall to the hidden compartment, the metal case and its contents, and finally the newspaper clippings that connected everything to the bank robbery decades earlier. He placed the yellowed articles on the table between them, evidence of his moral quandary. Uncle Emeka listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. When Chinedu finished, the older man picked up the clippings, examining them with the practiced eye of a former detective. "I remember this case," he said finally. "It was before my time on the force, but it was famous. One of Lagos's most notorious unsolved robberies. 3 men, well organized, in and out in less than 10 minutes. They were never identified. "So it's real," Chinedu said, though he'd already known this in his gut. "The money in my wall is stolen." "Almost certainly." Uncle Emeka set the clippings down carefully. "And you've told no one else about this discovery?" "Only you." The older man nodded approvingly. "Good. Now you need to decide what to do with this information, and with the money." "That's why I'm here," Chinedu admitted. "I don't know what the right thing is, legally or morally." Uncle Emeka considered this, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "Legally speaking, the statute of limitations on a robbery itself has expired. It's been nearly 40 years. However, possession of stolen property remains problematic, regardless of how much time has passed. So I should report it?" "I didn't say that," his uncle replied carefully. "I'm giving you facts to consider, not making your decision for you." He paused, studying Chinedu's troubled expression. "Tell me, what options have you considered?" Chinedu shifted uncomfortably. "I could keep it. No one knows it's there except me. The original owners, the bank, were certainly insured. After all this time, who would be hurt?" "Your conscience, perhaps," Uncle Emeka suggested mildly. "And what is your other option?" "Report it to the police," Chinedu said. "But then what? Would they believe I just found it accidentally? Would I be entangled in an investigation? Would I lose my grandfather's house anyway, if they needed to tear apart walls looking for more evidence?" Uncle Emeka nodded, acknowledging these concerns. "Valid questions. There is perhaps a middle path worth considering." "What do you mean?" "You could report the discovery, but approach it carefully," the older man explained. "Go through proper channels, with proper documentation of how and where you found it. Be transparent about everything." He leaned forward slightly. "In cases like this, where recovered property has been missing for decades, there are sometimes provisions for finder's fees or rewards, particularly if the original theft was from an insured institution like a bank." Chinedu considered this. "So I might not lose everything by doing the right thing?" "The right thing rarely leaves us with nothing," Uncle Emeka said with a small smile. "Though it may not give us everything we want, exactly when we want it." The wisdom in those words resonated with something deep in Chinedu's character. The values his parents and grandfather had instilled in him long before Nkechi had entered his life with her different priorities. "There's something else complicating this," he admitted. "Nkechi called this morning. She wants to reconcile." Uncle Emeka's eyebrow rose slightly. A fortunate coincidence of timing. "She doesn't know about the money," Chinedu clarified quickly. "But it feels significant that she's reaching out now, just as I found something that could solve the very problem she criticized me for." "And how do you feel about her renewed interest?" Chinedu stared at his hands, searching for honesty, confused. "Part of me wants to believe she's realized what really matters. Another part wonders if I was only ever one financial breakthrough away from being worthy in her eyes." "A fair question," his uncle acknowledged, "and one that might be answered by how you handle this discovery." "What do you mean?" "Character reveals itself most clearly when tested," Uncle Emeka said simply. "Both yours and hers. What you do with this found money will show something about who you are. How she responds to your decision will show something about who she is." The clarity of this perspective washed over Chinedu like cool water. He had been so caught up in the immediate implications of his discovery that he hadn't considered its value as a revealer of character, his own and Nkechi's. "I think I know what I need to do," he said finally. Uncle Emeka nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. "I believe you do. You've always known right from wrong. Chinedu, your grandfather made sure of that." As Chinedu prepared to leave, his uncle offered one final piece of advice. "Whatever you decide, document everything. Take photographs of where and how you found the money. Write down exactly what happened. Protect yourself with truth." With that guidance settling in his mind, Chinedu headed home to prepare for his dinner with Nkechi, his path forward becoming clearer with each step. Back at his house, he followed his uncle's advice immediately, thoroughly photographing the hidden compartment, the case, and its contents. He made detailed notes about the discovery, including when and how it had happened. Whatever came next, he would face it with complete transparency. As evening approached, He dressed for dinner with uncharacteristic detachment. The restaurant Nkechi had chosen would once have intimidated him, made him anxious about whether he belonged in such an exclusive establishment. Now, with the perspective of his discovery and his emerging decision about it, such concerns seemed trivial. He arrived early and waited at the bar, observing the other patrons. Lagos's elite enjoying the trappings of wealth and status. Once, he had seen these people through Nkechi's eyes, potential clients, useful connections, aspirational figures. Tonight, he simply saw human beings, no more or less significant than the customers at his local food stall. When Nkechi entered, heads turned. She was stunning in a form-fitting black dress, her makeup flawless, her confidence radiating like a physical force. She spotted him and approached with the smile that had first captured his heart 2 years earlier. "Chinidu," she said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. You look good." "So do you," he replied automatically, gesturing to the hostess that they were ready to be seated. Their table offered a view of Lagos's upscale district, lights twinkling against a darkening sky. Nkechi ordered an expensive bottle of wine, without consulting the price, a small but telling indication of her expectations for the evening. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she began after their drinks arrived, her voice carefully modulated to convey maturity and reason. "I may have expressed myself too harshly. Your attachment to your grandfather's house comes from a place of respect and love. I should have been more understanding of that." Chinidu studied her, trying to see beyond the practiced contrition to the woman beneath. "Thank you for acknowledging that." Encouraged by his response, she continued, "That said, I still believe we need to think practically about our future. Perhaps there's a compromise we haven't considered. Maybe we could renovate the house to a higher standard, make it more comfortable while preserving its significance to you." The suggestion was reasonable, conciliatory, and completely different from her position 24 hours earlier when she called his home a worthless shack and his attachment sentimentality. "Renovations would be expensive," he noted, watching her reaction carefully. "Well, yes," she admitted, "but your career is showing promise. That community center bid could be a turning point." Her hand reached across the table to cover his. "I believe in your potential, Chinidu. I always have." The words echoed hollowly against his memory of her departing statements. She believed in his potential to become what she wanted, a successful architect with the right address and connections. But did she believe in him as he was? Their food arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the conversation. As they ate, Nkechi skillfully directed the discussion towards safer topics: mutual friends, her work challenges, an upcoming art exhibition she thought he might enjoy. Not once did she reference returning the engagement ring or formally resuming their relationship. That, he suspected, would depend on his receptiveness to her overtures. "How is the renovation going?" she asked eventually, circling back to the central issue with careful casualness. "You mentioned you were starting work on the bedroom wall." The direct reference to the very spot where he'd made his discovery sent a jolt through Chinidu. Had she somehow heard about it? No, he decided that was impossible. Only he and Uncle Emeka knew. "It's revealing," he said carefully. "Breaking down old structures sometimes shows what's hidden beneath." She nodded, missing the double meaning entirely. "That's what I've been saying. The house is potential if you're willing to invest in uncovering it." The parallels to their relationship were too obvious to ignore. She saw potential in him, in the house, if only they could be renovated according to her specifications. "I've been thinking about what you said," Chinidu offered, deciding to test her reaction, "about living in the real world." Hope flashed across her features. "And the real world is complicated," he continued, "full of difficult choices and moral gray areas. For instance," he hesitated, then plunged ahead with a hypothetical. "If someone found money, a significant amount, that didn't belong to them, what do you think they should do?" Nkechi's brow furrowed slightly at this apparent non sequitur. "What do you mean? Didn't belong to them?" "Say it was potentially connected to something illegal. From long ago." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by calculation. "Well, that would depend on the circumstances, wouldn't it? How long ago? Whether anyone was still looking for it? what the statute of limitations might be. So it would be a pragmatic decision rather than a moral one, he pressed. She laughed lightly. Chinidu, morality isn't black and white, especially when it comes to money, if no one is being directly harmed by keeping it, and if reporting it would create problems without solving anything. She shrugged elegantly. I think most reasonable people would consider it a stroke of luck. Her answer didn't surprise him, but the certainty with which she expressed it was revealing. In Kechi's world, financial opportunity trumped abstract principles almost every time. An interesting perspective was all he said in response. Their dinner continued, the conversation flowing more easily as the wine diminished. By dessert, Nkechi had grown increasingly tactile, touching his hand, leaning closer, employing the subtle physical cues that had always weakened his resolve in past disagreements. I've missed you, she said softly as they waited for the check. One night apart was enough to realize how much you mean to me. The sincerity in her voice seemed genuine, and for a moment, Chinidu felt his determination waver. They had built a life together, over 2 years. Was he being unfair, judging her so harshly for prioritizing financial security? Wasn't that a natural concern for someone planning a future? As if sensing his uncertainty, Nkechi pressed her advantage. Why don't we go back to my place? We can talk more comfortably there. The invitation hung between them, loaded with implication. Reconciliation, both emotional and physical. A return to the familiar patterns of their relationship. I need to get home, he said instead, surprising himself with the firmness of his decision. I have an important meeting early tomorrow. Disappointment flickered across her face, quickly masked by understanding. Of course. Another time. Outside the restaurant, as they waited for their respective rideshare vehicles, Nkechi made one final attempt. I really am sorry about how things ended last night, she said, her voice soft in the warm evening air. You deserve better on your birthday of all days. Thank you, he said, genuinely appreciating the apology. So, where does this leave us? She asked directly. Are we working things out? Chinidu considered her question carefully. I think we both need time to be sure about what we want, what we value. I value you, she insisted. I always have. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but we may define value very differently. Her rideshare arrived before she could respond, saving him from further explanation. With a quick kiss on his cheek and a promise to call the next day, Nkechi departed, leaving Chinidu alone with his thoughts and a decision that awaited him at home. When he returned to his house, the silence greeted him like an old friend, no longer the lonely echo he'd sometimes perceived through Nkechi's eyes. This was a space imperfect but authentic, like himself. He went directly to his closet and retrieved the metal case, placing on his desk beside his architectural drawings. Physical representations of his past and potential future side by side. The money would change everything if he kept it. Renovations, business, investment, social standing. All the things Nkechi valued would suddenly be within reach. She would return fully to his life, proud to introduce him in her professional circles, eager to build the future she'd always envisioned. But at what cost to his integrity? To the values his grandfather had instilled in him? To his own self-respect? A knock at his door interrupted his contemplation. Hastily hiding the case, he answered to find Kemi standing on his porch, holding a covered dish and wearing a sympathetic smile. I know I said tomorrow, she explained, but I thought you might need dinner tonight more than promises of dinner tomorrow. The simple kindness, offered without agenda or expectation, touched something deep in Chinidu's chest. Unlike Nkechi's calculated reconciliation attempt, Kemi's gesture came from genuine friendship. Perfect timing, he admitted, stepping back to let her in. I just got home. Kemi moved with the familiarity of an old friend, heading directly to his kitchen to set down her offering. She wore simple jeans and a bright patterned top, her natural hair arranged in a practical style suitable for her work with elementary students. No expensive salon styling or designer labels, just Kemi, authentic and present. I made pepper soup, she said, uncovering the dish. Comfort food for complicated times. Thank you, he replied, the words inadequate for the warmth her presence brought. It's been quite a day. Want to talk about it? she offered, finding bowls in his cabinet with the ease of someone who had shared many meals in this kitchen. Or would you prefer distraction? The question, so different from Nkechi's careful maneuvering, highlighted the contrast between the women. One approached him with strategies and agendas. The other simply offered friendship without conditions. Actually, he said slowly, a decision crystallizing in his mind, I could use your perspective on something. They settled at a small dining table with steaming bowls of soup, and Chinedu presented her with the same hypothetical he'd given Nkechi. Curious how differently she might respond. If someone found money that might be connected to something illegal from long ago, what do you think they should do? Kemi considered the question seriously, blowing on a spoonful of soup before answering. That's a tough ethical question. I suppose it depends partly on how they found it and what kind of legal activity it might be connected to. Let's say they found it accidentally, in their own home, Chinedu suggested, and it might be connected to a bank robbery from decades ago. Her eyebrows rose at the specificity, but she continued thoughtfully. Well, that money came from somewhere. It belonged to someone, even if that was decades ago. The right thing would probably be to report it, even if that meant possibly not getting to keep it. Even if reporting it created complications, investigations, questions, potential suspicion. Doing the right thing often isn't the easiest path, Kemi said simply. But I think most people would sleep better at night, knowing they'd acted with integrity, even if it cost them something in the short term. The clarity of her moral reasoning, so different from Nkechi's pragmatic calculus, settled something in Chinedu's mind. She hadn't hesitated to prioritize ethical considerations over practical advantage, the same values his grandfather had exemplified throughout his life. That's what I think, too, he said quietly. Kemi studied him curiously. Is this a hypothetical for one of your clients or something else? Chinedu hesitated, then made another decision. Can you keep a secret? Just for a day or two? Of course. Carefully, he explained his discovery, showing her the hidden compartment, but not the case itself. Her eyes widened as she understood the magnitude of what he'd found and the moral dilemma it presented. Oh, Chinedu, she breathed. What are you going to do? I'm going to report it, he said, the decision now firm in his mind. Tomorrow morning. I've already documented everything, following Uncle Emeka's advice. That seems right, she agreed, relief evident in her expression. Though I understand why you'd be tempted otherwise. The timing is what makes it complicated, he admitted. Nkechi left me for being poor, essentially. Now I've found enough money to solve all the problems she identified. But keeping it would mean compromising everything I actually value about myself. Kemi's eyes reflected understanding beyond words, and she wants to reconcile now. She reached out this morning, before she could possibly know about this, he confirmed. We had dinner tonight. She was conciliatory. But... Kemi prompted gently. But I realized something important, Chinedu said slowly. When she looks at me, she sees potential, what I could become with the right adjustments, the right address, the right connections. When you look at me, you see me, who I actually am. The observation hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address directly. Kemi broke the moment with a small smile, returning to her soup. Well, I've known you since we were children, she said lightly. It would be hard not to see the real you after all this time. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but something had changed in the atmosphere between them. A recognition of alignment and values that created foundation for something deeper than their long-time friendship. After Kemi left, promising to check in the following day, Chinedu made his final preparations. He organized his documentation, placed the case where it would be ready for transport, and wrote a clear statement explaining exactly how he discovered the hidden money. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but his path was clear now. Whatever the outcome, whether he received a finder's fee or nothing at all, he would face it with his integrity intact and his grandfather's values honored. As he prepared for bed, his phone chimed with a text from Nkechi. Tonight was lovely. I'm so glad we're finding our way back to each other. Talk tomorrow? Red heart. The heart emoji, so casually appended, seemed to represent everything about their relationship, affection deployed strategically, with calculation behind every sentiment. He didn't respond immediately. Tomorrow would bring revelations that would test both their characters, revealing once and for all what each truly valued in the other. He found stolen money in the wall right after she dumped him. If you think he should keep IT and teach her a lesson or report IT and do the right thing, pound that like button and subscribe to Africantales by Zion. Comment below. Would you turn found money even if it meant staying broke? His decision in the next chapter will change everything. Share this story with someone facing a tough moral choice. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Morning arrived with the weight of certainty. Chinedu woke early, his decision solidified overnight into unwavering resolve. He would report the money today, regardless of consequences. After a quick breakfast, he called Uncle Emeka, who agreed to accompany him to the police station. Better to have a retired officer with you, his uncle advised. Someone who understands the system and can ensure everything is handled properly. As he prepared his documentation and secured the metal case for transport, Chinedu's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Nkechi. Each text grew slightly more insistent than the last, evolving from casual good morning wishes to direct questions about when they might meet again. He responded briefly. Busy with something important today. We'll call later. Her immediate reply revealed impatience barely masked by concern. Everything okay? Need any help? The offer was unprecedented. Nkechi had never before volunteered assistance with his problems, only criticism of his handling of them. The change in approach suggested she was genuinely invested in reconciliation, though whether from genuine feeling or calculated strategy remained unclear. No help needed, he texted back. Just something I need to handle myself. Before she could respond, a knock at his door announced Uncle Emeka's arrival. The older man entered with the dignified bearing of someone accustomed to navigating official systems, dressed formally as if for an important meeting. You're certain about this? He asked, noting the case and documentation prepared on Chinedu's table. Completely, Chinedu confirmed. It's the right thing to do. His uncle nodded with quiet approval. Then let's proceed properly. I've contacted an old colleague at headquarters, Chief Inspector Obasanjo. He's expecting us and will ensure this is handled with appropriate discretion. They carefully secured the case in Uncle Emeka's car and drove through morning traffic toward the police headquarters in Ikeja. Chinedu felt strangely calm, his earlier moral turmoil replaced by the peace that comes with certainty. Whatever the outcome, he would face it with his integrity intact. At the station, Uncle Emeka's former colleague greeted them with professional courtesy, ushering them into a private office rather than the public reception area. Chief Inspector Obasanjo was a serious man in his 50s, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Emeka has explained the broad outlines of your situation, he began, addressing Chinedu directly. But I'll need to hear everything from you, with all details, and examine what you found. For the next hour, Chinedu provided a comprehensive account of his discovery, supported by photographs, documentation, and finally, the case itself. He explained the circumstances, the broken engagement, the wall repair, the accidental finding, with complete transparency. The chief inspector listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When Chinedu finished, he opened the case and examined its contents with professional thoroughness, comparing the currencies and gold with the newspaper clippings about the 1985 robbery. This is quite extraordinary, he said finally. In 30 years of police work, I've rarely encountered something like this. What happens now? Chinedu asked, the practical question finally surfacing. A formal investigation will be opened, the officer explained. We'll need to document everything officially, take statements from both of you, and secure the evidence. The money and gold will need to be inventoried and held securely while we determine the legal implications. And the legal status of the find? Uncle Emeka prompted. My nephew discovered this accidentally, in a house he legally owns, with no connection to the original crime. The chief inspector considered this. The statute of limitations on the original robbery expired decades ago, so there's no criminal case to pursue there. As for the money itself, he paused, thinking. Given the circumstances, the time elapsed, the change in property ownership, the bank's certain insurance payout at the time, There are procedures for dealing with recovered property where the original criminal case is closed. What sort of procedures? Chinedu asked cautiously. Typically, an attempt will be made to return property to its rightful owner. In this case, the bank. Though after nearly 40 years and what was almost certainly an insurance settlement, their claim may be limited. There are also provisions for finder's fees in cases where citizens voluntarily turn and discover property, particularly when they could have easily kept it without anyone knowing. A small flicker of hope kindled in Chinedu's chest. So, there's a possibility I might receive something for reporting this? A strong possibility, the chief inspector confirmed, though I can't guarantee amounts or timelines. These cases can be complicated, and there's a process to follow. The next several hours passed in a blur of official procedures, formal statements, evidence logging, detailed photography of each item from a case, and completion of numerous forms. By mid-afternoon, Chinedu had signed the last document, officially transferring custody of the discovered money to the police while establishing his claim as a finder. We'll be in touch within the next few weeks as the process moves forward, the chief inspector assured him. In the meantime, I want to commend you for your honesty in reporting this. Many people would have made a different choice. As they left the station, Chinedu felt simultaneously lighter and heavier, relieved that he had followed his principles, but uncertain about what might follow. The money that could have immediately transformed his life was now in police custody, its ultimate disposition undetermined. You did the right thing, Uncle Emeka said as they drove back toward Chinedu's house. Whatever happens next, remember that. I know, Chinedu agreed, surprised by how firmly he believed it. Honestly, I feel cleaner somehow. Like I passed a test I didn't know I was taking. Character is fate, his uncle observed. Your grandfather used to say that. The choices we make determine not just what happens to us, but who we become in the process. When they arrived at his house, Chinedu was surprised to find Nkechi's car parked outside. She sat on his front steps, her expression a mixture of concern and impatience that transformed to relief when she saw him. "Where have you been?" she demanded, rising to greet them. "I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I had important business to handle," Chinedu replied, exchanging a meaningful glance with his uncle. Nkechi noticed the exchange, her perceptive eyes narrowing slightly. "What kind of business requires a disappearing act right after we start to reconcile?" Before Chinedu could respond, his phone rang, a journalist from the Lagos Daily, requesting comment on his discovery of the long-missing bank robbery money. News had traveled faster than he anticipated. "How did you get this number?" he asked, startled by the immediate media interest. "Police sources confirmed you turned in money connected to the 1985 National Commerce Bank robbery," the journalist explained eagerly. "Is it true you found it hidden in your wall? How much was there? Why did you decide to report it?" Chinedu ended the call with a promise to provide a statement later. But the damage was done. Nkechi had overheard enough to piece together the situation, her expression transforming from confusion to shock to calculation in rapid succession. "You found money?" she asked, voice carefully controlled. "In your wall? When?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than Chinedu expected. With Uncle Emeka as silent witness, he faced Nkechi directly. "Yesterday, after you left, I was starting the renovations and discovered a hidden compartment behind the damaged wall. The same wall you wanted me to demolish by selling the house." Her eyes widened as implications cascaded through her mind. "How much?" "Enough to renovate the entire house and more," he said simply. "Foreign currency and gold from a bank robbery in 1985, hidden there before my grandfather bought the property. And you turned it into police?" Disbelief colored her tone. "Without even telling me?" "It wasn't mine to keep," Chinedu explained. "And yes, I made that decision independently." Nkechi struggled visibly to process this information, emotions chasing across her expressive face. Shock, disappointment, calculation, and finally, an attempt at understanding. "Of course you did," she said, her voice shifting to a supportive tone that didn't quite mask her true feelings. "That was the principal choice. Very admirable." Uncle Emeka, watching this performance with the experienced eye of a former detective, excused himself tactfully. "I should be getting home. Chinedu, call if you need anything." Once they were alone, Nkechi's careful composure cracked slightly. "You could have at least discussed it with me first," she said, unable to completely hide her frustration. "We might have explored options." "What options?" Chinedu asked, already knowing the answer. It was stolen money. "Well, legal advice for one thing," she countered. "There might have been ways to claim it legitimately without just giving it away." "I didn't give it away," he corrected. "I reported it properly. There may still be a finder's fee, though that's not why I did it." This information rekindled interest in her eyes. "A finder's fee? How much?" "I don't know yet," he admitted. "It could be substantial or nothing at all. The point is, it wasn't my motivation." "No, of course not." Nkechi agreed quickly, adapting to this new reality with a flexibility that had made her successful in marketing. "You did what you thought was right. That's who you are." The pause before her final words revealed more than perhaps she intended. A recognition that his character operated from different principles than her own, principles she was now trying to reframe as admirable rather than impractical. "Would you like to come in?" Chinedu offered, curious to see how this conversation might develop. Inside, Nkechi took in the partially demolished wall with new interest, as though seeing the house differently now that it had proved to contain hidden value. "So it was right there all along," she mused, examining the exposed compartment. "While we were arguing about selling this worthless shack." The irony wasn't lost on her. "Life has a strange sense of timing," Chinedu agreed, watching her closely. Nkechi turned to face him, visibly reorganizing her approach. "Well, regardless of how this finder's fee situation works out, I want you to know I'm proud of your integrity. Not many people would have made that choice." The praise fell hollow, too calculated to warm him as her approval once had. Yet he recognized she was making an effort, attempting to align herself with values she hadn't prioritized just days earlier. "Thank you," he said simply. "So what now?" she asked, settling onto his couch with newfound comfort. "For us, I know things got heated the other night, but I really do think we can work through our differences." The directness of her pivot was almost admirable in its efficiency. Yesterday's moral judgments transformed overnight into today's flexible adaptations, all without acknowledging the fundamental disconnection in their values. Before Chinedu could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Kemi. "Saw the news about your discovery. So proud of you for doing the right thing. Call when you're free." The simple message, free of agenda or calculation, highlighted everything his conversation with Nkechi lacked. One woman was proud of him for making a choice that might leave him no better off financially. The other was recalibrating her interests based on potential finder's fees. "I need time," he told Nkechi honestly. "The last 48 hours have been transformative in ways I'm still processing." "Of course," she agreed, though disappointment flickered briefly in her eyes. "Just know that I'm here, ready to support whatever comes next." As she prepared to leave, making plans for dinner later that week with a confidence that assumed their reconciliation was merely a matter of time, Chinedu felt a strange sense of clarity. The Nkechi before him was unchanged from the woman who had returned his ring and walked away. What had changed was his perception and his willingness to accept conditions on his worth. Over the next week, Chinedu's life took on a surreal quality. His discovery made local headlines, then national ones, with journalists regularly appearing at his door seeking interviews. The story had all the elements media loved: hidden treasure, moral choices, historical connections to a famous unsolved crime. He handled the attention with quiet dignity, giving only brief statements emphasizing that he had simply done what he believed was right. The narrative that emerged painted him as a man of principle, a characterization that brought unexpected professional interest. "Your integrity has caught people's attention," his friend Tund observed over drinks at a local bar. "I've heard your name mentioned in architectural circles that wouldn't have given you the time of day before." "Strange how that works." Chinedu mused. "I turn down money and suddenly I'm more valuable." "People respect character," Tund replied, "especially when it costs something." The observation proved prophetic. Within days, Chinedu received calls from potential clients who cited his refreshing integrity as a quality they sought in an architect. The community center bid he considered a long shot suddenly advanced him to the final selection round, with the committee chair mentioning they wanted someone whose ethics were demonstrably sound. Nkechi observed a professional uptick with evident satisfaction, positioning herself increasingly as his partner in managing the new opportunities. She began accompanying him to meetings, offering marketing advice, suggesting ways to leverage his newfound visibility. "This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for," she told him after a particularly promising meeting with a wealthy client. "Your name is opening doors that were previously closed." Though we didn't escape Chinedu's notice, the automatic assumption that his professional advancement included her by default, despite their undefined relationship status. He allowed this ambiguity to continue, still processing his evolving feelings. 10 days after his discovery, he received a call from Chief Inspector Obasanjo requesting a meeting the following morning. The officer offered no details over the phone, but his tone suggested positive developments. When he mentioned the appointment to Nkechi during their dinner that evening, she immediately offered to accompany him. "You'll want someone there to help assess any offers they make," she insisted. "I deal with negotiations all the time in my work. I think I should handle this myself," Chinedu replied, the boundary feeling both necessary and clarifying. Disappointment flashed across her features before she masked it with understanding. "Of course. Just call me immediately afterward." The following morning, Chinedu arrived at police headquarters to find not only Chief Inspector Obasanjo waiting, but also representatives from a national commerce bank and a government legal advisor. The formal atmosphere suggested significant developments. "Mr. Konkwo," the chief inspector began once they were seated in a conference room. "Thank you for coming. We've completed our initial investigation regarding the funds you discovered and reported." The bank representative, a serious woman in her 50s, took over. "As you know, these funds were stolen from National Commerce Bank in 1985. While the statute of limitations on the criminal case expired long ago, the bank maintained a theoretical claim to the recovered property. However, the legal advisor interjected. Given the unique circumstances, the time elapsed, the insurance settlement pay at the time, and most importantly, your voluntary reporting of the discovery, there are provisions for resolution that recognize your role." Chinedu listened carefully, attempting to discern the direction of their explanation. "What sort of resolution?" The bank representative consulted her notes. "After calculating the original loss, insurance payments, and applicable legal precedents, we've determined the following. The bank will reclaim 60% of the recovered funds, with the remaining 40% awarded to you as a finder's fee, in recognition of your integrity in reporting the discovery." The percentage registered slowly in Chinedu's mind, its implications expanding as he calculated mentally. 40% of the discovered money and gold would amount to a substantial sum, not the immediate fortune the entire find represented, but certainly enough to renovate his house properly and invest in his architectural practice. "This is a quite generous arrangement," the legal advisor noted, "influenced largely by the fact that you came forward voluntarily with a discovery you could easily have kept secret. The bank also wishes to acknowledge your honesty publicly," the representative added. "With your permission, we'd like to hold a small ceremony next week, presenting a finder's fee with appropriate recognition of your ethical choice. It would be good publicity for both parties." Chinedu absorbed this information, emotions conflicting within him. He hadn't reported the money expecting reward. Yet here it was, not the full amount, but a legitimate portion that would significantly improve his circumstances without compromising his principles. "I would be honored," he said finally, "though my decision wasn't motivated by expectations of reward." "Which is precisely why you deserve it," the chief inspector observed with quiet approval. "Character rewards itself in unexpected ways." The meeting concluded with paperwork to process the finder's fee, which would be transferred to Chinedu's account following the public ceremony. As he left the building, a profound sense of vindication settled over him, not prideful, but peaceful. He had made the right choice for the right reasons, and while the outcome wasn't the immediate wealth the hidden money had represented, it was perhaps something better: prosperity with integrity intact. Outside headquarters, he found Kemi waiting beside her modest car, a small cooler on the passenger seat. "I thought you might need lunch after your meeting," she explained with a smile. "Good news or difficult news, food helps with processing." The thoughtful gesture, offered without expectation of details or demands for involvement, contrasted sharply with Nkechi's approach. Here was support without agenda, friendship without calculation. Perfect timing, he said, genuine warmth flooding his voice. And actually the news is good. Very good. They drove to a quiet park where Kemi unpacked a simple but delicious lunch. Between bites of jollof rice and grilled chicken, Chinedu explained the meeting's outcome and the unexpected finder's fee. 40%? Kemi's eyes widened with delight. Chinedu, that's wonderful. You can renovate properly, invest in your practice. All while knowing it came legitimately, he completed her thought. Not from keeping something that wasn't mine to begin with. The best of both worlds, she agreed, her pride in him evident. Though I know you would have made the same choice regardless of the outcome. The confidence in her statement, her absolute faith in his character, touched something deep in Chinedu's heart. Unlike Nkechi, who had needed to reframe his ethical choice as admirable after the fact, Kemi had never doubted the rightness of his decision, regardless of practical consequences. As they finished their meal, Chinedu's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Nkechi, each more insistent than the last, demanding updates about his meeting. He silenced the device, choosing instead to remain present in this moment of quiet celebration with someone who valued him for who he was, not what he might become or provide. I need to make some decisions, he said finally, as they packed up the remains of lunch. About the house, my practice, and other things. Kemi nodded, understanding the unspoken elements of his statement. Whatever you decide, make sure it's truly what you want, not what someone else thinks you should want. That's excellent advice, he acknowledged, thinking of all the times he'd compromised his preferences to accommodate Nkechi's vision of their future. I think I'm finally learned the difference. That evening, rather than immediately sharing the news with Nkechi, as she'd requested, Chinedu took time to reflect on everything that had transpired since his birthday. The broken engagement, the discovery, his moral choice, and now this unexpected outcome. Each event revealing something essential about himself and those around him. His phone continued to accumulate messages from Nkechi, her tone evolving from curious to concerned to frustrated as his silence extended. The pattern was familiar. Her need for immediate information, for involvement in his decisions, for control of the narrative. Finally, he responded simply, "Good news from the meeting. Need time to process. Talk tomorrow." Her immediate reply came with practiced understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'm here whenever you're ready." The message should have been comforting, but instead it highlighted everything that had become clear in recent days. Nkechi was there conditionally. When his prospect aligned with her vision, when his choices to be reframed to fit her narrative, when his value to her outweighed her disappointment in his circumstances. Kemi, in contrast, had always been present, supportive when he struggled, celebratory when he succeeded, accepting of his values even when they led to choices she might not have made herself. The difference wasn't in their words, but in their consistent actions over time. As Chinedu prepared for bed in his partially renovated house, he felt a sense of alignment he hadn't experienced in months. Tomorrow would bring decisions about his finder's fee, his renovation plans, his professional opportunities, and perhaps most importantly, about which relationships truly deserve place in his future. For the first time since his grandfather's death, he felt the old man's approving presence, as though the house itself were affirming his choices. Whatever came next, he would face it with integrity intact and vision clear, not just about the home he would rebuild, but about the life he would construct within it. They're giving him 40% of the stolen money as a reward. If you think Nkechi deserves another chance now that he'll be rich, or if Kemi is his true match, crush that like button and subscribe to Africantales by Zion. Comment below. Is money revealing everyone's true colors in the story? The final chapter brings the ultimate confrontation you won't believe. Share with someone who needs to see that honesty really does pay. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a conclusion. 3 months passed with the swift intensity of transformation. Chinedu's house underwent a remarkable evolution. Skilled craftsmen restored original character while adding modern comforts, preserving the legacy his grandfather cherished while creating a home that reflected Chinedu's own architectural sensibilities. Each room revealed the care of someone renovating not for resale value, but for the joy of honoring both past and future. His professional life bloomed with similar vigor. The community center contract he'd hoped for came through, followed by commissions from clients who specifically cited his integrity as their reason for seeking him out. His small practice expanded, requiring a modest office space and 2 junior architects to handle the growing workload. The finder's fee ceremony at National Commerce Bank had generated publicity beyond anything he could have anticipated. The honest architect became his unexpected brand, with media coverage focusing on his choice to report the discovered money rather than keep it secretly. In a city where corruption and self-interest often dominated headlines, his story offered a refreshing counter-narrative. Throughout this whirlwind of change, 2 women maintained distinct orbits around his life. Nkechi, upon learning of his finder's fee, had pivoted seamlessly from conditional reconciliation to enthusiastic partnership, inserting herself into renovation decisions, client meetings, and social opportunities as new status afforded. She never explicitly mentioned resuming their engagement, but her presence in his life expanded as though their breakup had been merely a minor disagreement rather than a fundamental revelation of values. Kemi, in contrast, maintained her steady friendship without leveraging his improved circumstances. She celebrated his successes with genuine joy, offered perspectives when asked, and continued their tradition of shared meals and honest conversations. Unlike Nkechi, she never presumed involvement in his decisions or claimed credit for his achievements. The contrast between these approaches grew more stark with each passing week, informing Chinedu's thinking as he prepared for the housewarming party that would mark the completion of his renovations. The evening of the gathering arrived with perfect weather, warm enough for guests to enjoy his newly landscaped garden, cool enough for comfort inside the restored home. He had invited a carefully curated group: close friends, new clients, his uncle and other family members, and, of course, both Nkechi and Kemi. Nkechi arrived first, an hour early with arms full of additional decorations she deemed necessary. Her appearance was impeccable: designer dress, professional makeup, jewelry chosen to impress rather than merely adorn. "The caterers need direction," she announced, sweeping into the house as though co-hosting were her established role. "And I brought better wine than what you ordered. Trust me, the Crawford brothers expect a certain caliber of refreshments." The Crawford brothers, wealthy property developers who had recently expressed interest in Chinedu's designs, had indeed been invited, though he hadn't mentioned this to Nkechi. Her network of connections and information gathering remained impressively efficient. "Thank you," he said neutrally, accepting the wine but setting aside her decorations. "But everything is arranged as I want it." She paused, registering his gentle but firm boundary. Over recent weeks, he had begun establishing such limits with increasing clarity, though always with politeness that made direct confrontation difficult. "Of course," she recovered smoothly. "It's your celebration. I'm just excited for people to see what you've accomplished." "What you've accomplished, not what we've accomplished." The distinction was small but significant, one of many subtle adjustments she'd made to her language as she recognized his growing independence. As Nkechi busied herself inspecting the catering arrangements despite his assurance that no oversight was needed, Chinedu completed his own preparations with calm deliberation. The house, his grandfather's legacy, his own restored home, gleamed with a patina of quality work rather than showy ostentation. Original woodwork had been carefully preserved, traditional elements honored alongside thoughtful modernizations. The result was a space that felt simultaneously timeless and contemporary, much like the values it represented. Guests began arriving promptly at 7. Uncle Emeka came with his wife, both expressing genuine admiration for the renovation's respectful approach to the home's character. New clients mingled with old friends, professional connections with personal ones, creating the relaxed atmosphere of a gathering centered on relationships rather than networking. Kemi arrived wearing a simple but elegant dress, her natural hair arranged in a style that framed her face beautifully. Unlike Nkechi's calculated glamour, her appearance reflected authentic celebration, special without performance. "The house looks amazing," she told Chinedu, her appreciation extending beyond polite compliment to genuine understanding of what he'd accomplished. "Your grandfather would be so proud to see how you've honored his legacy while making it your own." "Thank you," he replied, the words carrying weight beyond conventional response. That means a lot, especially coming from someone who knew him. Throughout the evening, Chinedu observed the contrasting approaches of the women in his life. Nkechi worked the room with practiced charm, introducing herself to important guests, positioning herself advantageously in conversations about his projects, creating an impression of intimate involvement in his success. Her skill was undeniable. Her ability to align herself with his rising trajectory executed with the precision of a professional image consultant. Kemi moved to the gathering differently, genuinely connecting with people regardless of their potential utility, discussing ideas rather than status, showing interest in other stories rather than opportunities they might present. When asked her connection to Chinedu, she described herself simply as an old friend, claiming no ownership of his achievements or special status in his life. As the evening progressed, Chinedu found himself repeatedly drawn to Kemi's authentic presence, even as Nkechi worked to position herself at his side during key interactions with important guests. The contrast had never been more evident, or his own preference more clear. Near the party's peak, with a house full of admiring guests, Nkechi orchestrated what she clearly intended as a defining moment. Clinking her glass for attention, she called for a toast. To Chinedu, she began, positioning herself beside him with practiced precision, whose talent and integrity have finally received the recognition they deserve. Some of us always saw your potential, even when circumstances obscured it from others. Your transformation of this house proves what can happen when you embrace both your past and future possibilities. The toast was skillfully crafted to associate herself with his success, while subtly recasting her earlier rejection as visionary encouragement. Guests raised their glasses, unaware of the narrative reconstruction occurring before them. To Chinedu, they echoed, appreciation genuine if context incomplete. As conversations resumed, Nkechi remained at his side, her hand occasionally touching his arm in gestures of intimacy calculated to establish a position to observers. Her voice dropped to a private tone. "Everyone is impressed," she murmured, "especially the Crawfords. We should invite them for a more private dinner next week to discuss the potential development project Jonathan mentioned. We slipped in so naturally it might have gone unnoticed months earlier. Now, it registered clearly as assumption rather than reality. Before Chinedu could respond, Uncle Emeka approached with Kemi beside him. "Nephew," the older man said warmly, "your grandfather's house has never looked better, yet it still feels like a home he created. That's a remarkable achievement. Kemi was just telling me about your plans for the community center," his aunt added. "The design sounds wonderful, practical but uplifting." "Kemi knows my work well," Chinedu acknowledged, grateful for her understanding of what mattered most to him professionally. "She's been listening to my ideas since university days." Nkechi's smile tightened almost imperceptibly at this reminder of a connection predating her own. "Chinedu's vision has evolved considerably since then," she interjected smoothly. "His recent projects reflect much more sophisticated influences." The subtle repositioning, acknowledging the past while claiming superior insight into his present, was executed with practiced grace. Yet something in her tone struck a discordant note, highlighting the performative nature of her support. As the evening continued, Chinedu found himself at a crucial juncture, not just hosting a housewarming, but standing at the threshold of decisions about which relationships belonged in his renovated life. The house, with its thoughtful balance of heritage and renewal, seemed to demand similar integrity in his personal choices. When most guests had departed, leaving only a few close friends and family, Chinedu found himself momentarily alone in his study. The room that had once been his grandfather's favorite space, now restored with particular care. Through the open door, he could hear Nkechi discussing future social engagements with a lingering client, her voice confident in his presumption of continued partnership. From the garden came different sounds. Kemi's gentle laughter as she helped his young cousins collect the paper lanterns that had illuminated the outdoor space during the party. No agenda in her assistance, simply the natural extension of someone who engaged with life directly rather than strategically. A presence at his study door drew his attention. Uncle Emeka stood watching him with knowing eyes. "You've built something worthy here," the older man observed, his gaze taking in the restored room. not just the house, but the life it represents. Thank you, Chinita replied. I couldn't have navigated the past few months without your guidance. His uncle shook his head slightly. You knew the right path. You simply needed confirmation of what you already understood. He paused, glancing toward the sounds of Nkechi's networking, then Kemi's genuine interaction. The same might be said of other choices before you now. The gentle wisdom in those words crystallized what Chinidu had been feeling throughout the evening. Some decisions, once seen clearly, cannot be unrecognized. As the last guest prepared to leave, Nkechi approached with purposeful confidence. I'll stay to help with final arrangements, she announced rather than offered. We should discuss the Crawford project while it's fresh in your mind. They're clearly interested in your concept for the riverfront development. Before Chinidu could respond, Kemi appeared with his aunt, preparing to depart. Everything's tidied in the garden, she said simply. Your cousins were wonderful helpers. Thank you, he replied, the words encompassing more than just the immediate assistance. His aunt embraced him warmly. Such a lovely evening, nephew. Your grandfather will be proud of the man you become. Successful, yes, but more importantly, true to his values. As they moved toward the door, Chinita made a decision that felt less like choice and more like recognition of truth. Kemi, he called softly, could you stay a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss. Surprise registered briefly in her expressive eyes, but she nodded. Of course. Nkechi observed this exchange with the sharp attention of someone accustomed to reading social currents. Her smile remained fixed, but calculation flickered behind her composed expression. After seeing his aunt and uncle out, Chinita returned to find Nkechi and Kemi in his living room, the atmosphere charged with unspoken awareness. Three people understanding that a defining moment had arrived. It's been a successful evening, Nkechi began, taking control of the narrative as was her habit. Your renovation has impressed exactly the right people. I've already laid groundwork with the Crawfords for the development proposal, and Minister Obasanjo's wife mentioned interest in having you design their new residence. Her cataloging of achievements and opportunities continued, each connection and possibility presented as further joint efforts. The we and our sprinkled throughout her assessment with deliberate frequency. Chinidu listened without interruption, allowing her to complete the performance that had become increasingly transparent to him over recent months. When she finally paused, expectantly awaiting his grateful acknowledgement, he spoke with gentle clarity. Thank you for your efforts tonight, he said, the words genuine despite their finality. You've always been skilled at identifying advantages and positioning for success. Something in his tone alerted her. The slight stiffening of her posture revealed recognition that this wasn't proceeding as anticipated. It's what partners do, she responded carefully. Support each other's advancement. Is that what we are? He asked quietly. Partners? The directness of the question hung in the air. Kemi, sensitive to the private nature of the conversation, moved toward the door. I should go and let you two talk. Please stay, Chinita requested, his gaze still on Nkechi. What I need to say involves both of you in different ways. Nkechi's expression shifted from confidence to wariness, professional poise preparing for unexpected negotiation. What exactly are we discussing, Chinidu? Clarity, he replied simply, about the future and who belongs in it. He took a breath, organizing thoughts that had been forming for months. When you returned my engagement ring on my birthday, you made your values clear. My worth to you is conditional, dependent on financial status, property decisions, social positioning. That's not fair, she protested, though without her usual conviction. I was frustrated by your unwillingness to consider practical realities. We all say things in the heat of argument that we don't fully mean. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but actions reveal truth more clearly than words. You walked away when I was struggling. You returned when my prospects improved. Each decision perfectly aligned with your personal advantage. The assessment hung between them, its accuracy difficult to dispute despite her carefully crafted reconciliation narrative. People make mistakes, she said finally. I've acknowledged mine. We've been rebuilding our relationship for months now. Why raise this ancient history on tonight of all nights? Because tonight crystallized something I've been recognizing gradually, Chinedu explained, his tone free from accusation despite the difficult truth he was articulating. You're extraordinarily skilled at aligning yourself with success and distancing yourself from struggle. It's made you successful in your career and social circles. But it's not the foundation for the kind of partnership I want in my life. Nkechi's composure wavered momentarily before professional recovery. Is this about her? She asked, glancing toward Kemi, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Have you two been? This is about clarity, Chinedu interrupted gently. About recognizing that some relationships thrive in prosperity but wither in adversity. About understanding that genuine connection isn't measured in advantages gained but in constancy through all circumstances. Understanding dawned in Nkechi's eyes. Not just his decision, but how thoroughly he had seen to the narrative she had constructed around their reconciliation. For a woman accustomed to controlling perceptions, such transparency was perhaps the greatest defeat. I see, she said, dignity replacing calculation in her bearing. You've made your decision, then. I have, he confirmed quietly. She gathered her purse with practiced composure, the marketing executive who never showed defeat even when campaigns failed to launch. I wish you success, Chinedu. Perhaps one day you'll recognize that practical considerations and genuine feeling aren't mutually exclusive. With those parting words, a final attempt to reframe her approach as wisdom rather than self-interest, she departed, heels clicking decisively on the restored wooden floors of the home she had once dismissed as worthless. In the silence that followed, Chinedu turned to Kemi, whose presence had remained respectfully unobtrusive throughout the difficult exchange. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said simply. No need for apologies, she assured him. Clarity is never comfortable in the moment, but always valuable in the long term. The wisdom in her response, understanding without judgment, embodied everything he had come to value more deeply through recent months of transformation. The renovation is beautiful, she said after a moment, her gaze taking in the restored space around them. But more importantly, it's authentic. Honor what came before while creating something that truly reflects who you are now. That was always the goal, he acknowledged, though I couldn't have articulated it so clearly before everything that's happened. Sometimes we need contrast to recognize what matters most to us, Kemi observed. Challenges reveal priorities we might not examine in easier times. The insight resonated deeply. His grandfather's house, once derided as a worthless shack by someone seeing only its market value, had revealed both hidden treasure and essential truth about character, his own and others. I've been thinking about something my grandfather used to say, Chinedu shared, moving to stand beside Kemi near the window overlooking his garden. That our choices create the architecture of our lives, beam by beam, wall by wall. Some choices form foundation, others merely decoration. He was wise, Kemi said softly. The foundation matters most. Yes. Chinedu turned to face her directly. And I've realized that you've always been part of my foundation, Kemi. Consistent, supportive, honest, valuing me for who I am rather than what I might provide or become. The admission hung between them, both acknowledgement of past and possibility for future. Neither rushed to define what might develop from this recognition, content to allow authentic connection to evolve at its natural pace. Would you like to see the garden in daylight sometime? He asked finally. Perhaps tomorrow? The landscaper incorporated some of your suggestions about native plants. Her smile held warmth that needed no calculation or performance. I like that very much. As they walked together through the restored house, his grandfather's legacy renewed through integrity rather than compromise, Chinedu felt a sense of completion that transcended material renovation. The hidden fortune in the wall had indeed transformed his life, though not in the way he might have initially imagined. The true wealth had come not from the money itself, but from the choices it prompted and the character it revealed. In himself and those around him, his house stood restored, his career flourished, and his heart recognized with clarity which connections deserved place in the architecture of his future. Some fortunes he reflected as he and Kemi stepped into the night garden illuminated by the last of the paper lanterns. Couldn't be measured in currency at all. After all that sabotage and jealousy, Adana still gave Chioma a second chance. If you believe in forgiveness or think she should have cut her off completely, crush that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion. Comment below. Would you have forgiven Chioma or ended the friendship forever? This story proves that one ACT of kindness can change your entire life. Share with someone who needs to hear this message. And stay tuned for our next amazing story. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it.